Hello and welcome back to my channel again. I'm spilling my tea. It's Monday and today I was going to talk about tie-ins, TV and film tie-in fiction. Hang on. Because I'm reading this on an ebook, The Novelizors by David Spencer, which I'm reading by ebook, but you can get hardback and paperback. It's a huge compendious history of the tie-in fiction world. Novelizers is a brilliant title, but it refers both to people who adapt screenplays to novel-length fiction, but also people who write tie-in fiction, taking the characters from TV and films and making original stories from them. And in the introduction, which is autobiographical and quite brilliant, David Spencer makes a good case for the artistry of this kind of work and how it's usually looked at quite sniffily and askance by all kinds of people in publishing and in the book world. And of course, it's a long and honourable tradition, as he goes on to prove. Almost 100 years of people writing versions of stuff that we see on the screen and delivering it straight into our heads through the medium of the printed page. I've known lots of novelizers, and I am an occasional novelizer. And some of the nicest people I know in publishing work in that world, and there's a great camaraderie. They are a lot of the time fans of the things they work on. That's not to say that what they produce is fan fiction, because they have so much responsibility to the people they're working for and the people they're writing for to get it right. And lots of rules, lots of invisible rules to this kind of writing. Anyway, the book seems marvellous. I'm trotting through it. There's chapters on all sorts of things and hidden histories. That's what I'm really interested in. It's like reading something from the third wave of feminism in the 70s or 80s, or gay fiction, queer fiction through the ages, where you hear these untold histories of people working at the coalface, really, or pulp fiction. I'm thinking about things like Justin Marriott's The Paperback Fanatic fanzines, where you learn all this stuff about people who wrote lots of pulp fiction in 50s, 60s, 70s. Usually uncelebrated, but making their way. And I'm fascinated by that. What the unkinder world might call hacks, because they have to turn out the pages every day and every week. They don't get to dick around as much as the more literary authors do, perhaps. Anyway, it's made me think about tie-in fiction and my own thoughts about it. There's a beautiful bit where one of his friends, an actor called Daniel Marcus, I think, writes to him, and he gets this letter about, because he interviews lots of people for this book, and Daniel Marcus writes about his favourite novelization that he'd ever read, and it was the book of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which was came out under the name of Steven Spielberg, the director, and of course it wasn't. It was ghostwritten by somebody else whose name I don't actually know, and I should know. Anyway, this letter talks about how the novelization was more personal, and there was a particular line at the very end about the photographs being taken by the woman watching her boyfriend leave on this, the mothership. And there's a line in the book about those photos being the most important ever taken on Earth, and it's just dropped in there as a kind of important but almost casually dropped fact. And it's right, there are lines that leap out of novelizations and you think that was never in the film, that was never in the TV, things you come to associate with the story, and it was purely the gift of the book based on the film or TV show. And there are lots of examples of that. Anyway, this actor says something absolutely brilliant then. At the end of his letter to David Spencer, he says, we look at films, we look at TV. Books are different because books look into us. And I love that distinction. To me, that brings out the passive quality of watching TV and film. Now, I know there are arguments against that. Of course, we actively watch things. We critique, we engage with, we talk over things we're watching all the time. Although the people we're sat with might tell us to be quiet as we talk over these things. But of course, we are creatively engaged with what we watch on TV a lot of the time. Other times it is more passive. And the point is, we could sit there and it could just wash over us. And there is this weird thing, isn't it, where they're talking about in script writing circles about second screen mentality, where you have to write scripts that endlessly restate what's going on, restate all the clues, all the information, again and again and again, because people are looking at iPads or phones at the same time. They're tweeting, they're doing all this kind of virtual bollocks at the same time as, when they should be watching the thing they're watching, which is why you get TV shows that are very repetitive and spoon-feedy. I was thinking about that watching the new Doctor Who, where we get 20 minutes on TARDISes, time travel, paradoxes, Time Lords, Susan, all these things that in the past would have been fed in a lot more subtly, perhaps. Anyway, books, of course, you have to be attentive the whole time because you're deciphering, you're making the book disappear. When you read, you are demolishing the book, which always makes me laugh about people who love books in perfect condition, because the act of reading is demolishing them. You're praying the materiality of the book away. You want it to melt, leaving nothing but pure story inside your head. And you have to work to do that. And it becomes second nature. That's what reading is. But it still takes an active role. You have to take an active role. But the book is active too. And I love that idea that the book looks into you. It looks back at you. Almost as if it had consciousness itself, which takes us back to those conversations my writing group was having just a couple of weeks ago about the nature of consciousness. Some of the people were quite drunk as they talked about this, of course. Anyway, I thought I'd do some more talking about tie-ins, because I've amassed a pile of favourites behind me. Now this, it seems to have cards inside and all sorts of things. This is it's a library copy, but well looked after, of Jim Henson's The Storyteller. The show was written by Anthony Minghella, and he writes the book version, the novelization. There's lots of cards in this. There's the Day of the Triffids inside. It's a really nicely illustrated tie-in, really lavish. You don't see it often about the place. The Storyteller is a show that I think is one of my all-time favourite bits of TV. John Hurt and Jim Henson's Creature Shop, telling us these very concise, very old stories, telling them in a kind of a way that just melted from one scene to the next, that took us into the realm of story, seemingly effortlessly. I believe, CGI, so it's all mechanical effects, it's puppetry, it's and lots of kinds of puppetry too, silhouettes, animation, mostly rubbery and hairy puppets squabbling, and it's one of my favourite shows. It always will be. The book is, I seem to remember, quite densely written, which is a bit of a shame. Maybe it was just me at the time. It's a beautiful book, but think I prefer the TV show, which is unusual. Anyway, that's the Storyteller, one to return to. Now, these are ones that I've hiked down off the shelves that I've mentioned before, I think. My huge collection of Hardy Boys books. Of course, the books came first, then there was a TV show, and then there were more books. And look, here's a real classic. The Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew meet Dracula. I love that point in the 70s when action-adventure shows for kids and young adults just didn't care anymore. Well, they did care, but they didn't care about not being cheesy, and they really went for it. So you had, every season of The Bionic Man, Bigfoot came stomping back for another rematch. There was The Incredible Hulk and Spider-Man on TV, and I wish there were novelisations and original novels based on those. And I wish there were more team-ups. I know they've been doing such things in comics. Such a child of the 70s. If there's characters about, I want to see them team up. I want to see them having battles against each other. There was a really lovely series of comics recently in which the crew of the original Enterprise went to the planet of the apes. It didn't work out terribly well for anybody. I think it was good though. It was nicely drawn from what I remember. Space 1999 is blessed with a series of novelizations. E.C. Tubb, obviously a science fiction writer in his own right, did the first story, Breakaway, and then did it at greater length in Spacefall. This is belonging to a friend of mine, and I think it might have been a lend several years ago. It's a lot more adult. This is the kind of Virgin New Adventures compared with the Target book, Doctor Who parallel. Moon Odyssey, John Rankin. These are lovely editions, I think. Brian Ball, Space Guardians. I think I've only got a few of these. Collision Course, E.C. Tubb. Lunar Attack. So we done that one? No, John Rankin. The one we're missing, and I hope it was done, is The Bringers of Wonder, which has always been my favourite episode, about the blobby, globular, green tentacled creatures that arrive on the moon base, disguised as the long-lost relatives and friends and lovers of the crew, who think they're being reunited, who think that their return to Earth is imminent, and only Captain Koenig knows the truth. I'd love to read the novel of that. I must look for that, actually. That's just occurred to me. Right. These are some of the further Battlestar Galactica sequels. This one is great. The Cylon Death Machine, based on a very, I think, mediocre actual episode. But Robert Thurston, it says with Glenn A. Larson, although I doubt it. These producers and directors used to get their names on things, didn't they? It's like the current vogue of putting actors' names on the front of Doctor Who books, which is fair enough if they're going to sell them, but so long as the actual writers get some credit too and get properly paid, it's okay, I guess. It's just the fans saying, I never knew Fraser Hines wanted to be a novelist. Well, I don't suppose he did really, or the others. If actors had their screen credits changed, this actor will be played by this writer in this episode, I'm sure they'd kick off. I like people being credited fairly and properly for what they're doing. And we're in such a kind of stupid world of showbiz everything and celebrity everything, and that celebrities can write books. This is bound to happen, but I think people should be paid and credited correctly. End of lesson. Battlestar Galactica 3, The Tombs of Kobol, which is a good one. I think it's the kind of pyramids one. Again, Glenn A. Larson, but Robert Thurston presumably is the writer. And Greetings from Earth. This time it's Ron Coulard. That wasn't quite so good, I think. It's number 8. I've read it in recent times. The Cylon Death Machine has a fantastic bit, and I bet I've not kept a note of where it is, in which Captain Adama talks about the science fiction novels he loved as a kid. Oh yeah, Sharky, Star Rover were his favourite books. And it becomes almost kind of metafictional. When he writes his journal about reading these books, and now he's having his own space adventures. Nobody I knew who ever read it ever bothered much about believing in its ending. Clearly Sharky's Star Rover, this is Captain Adama in his journals, was a flawed book, and perhaps some misguided programmer librarian thought she had a good reason for not including it in the Galactica computer library. That's too bad. It's almost like an echo of tie-in fiction being left out of the literary canon. Sharky's quest for a more adventurous life seems so similar to our quest for Earth. The story might give us hope when we need it. No matter how much of the book I can reconstruct, no matter how much eloquence I attempt in trying to retell the story to anyone, I'll never really have Sharky again. So much has been destroyed, so much. It's about ephemera, isn't it? About the way these old paperbacks fall to pieces and we lose stuff, and that a lot of our nostalgia itself isn't a passive act. To me, it's an active kind of reconstruction. You are actively trying to put things back together inside your head. Your memories are trying to pull stories back together. And for a certain generation, that means memories of TV shows, of books, of films, as much as it is actual life. And I think it's a great kind of imaginative act. I shall whiz through some more of these. Now, I promised to get this series down to show you before. This is my small collection of Upstairs, Downstairs. Novelizations. Some are, and this is a good one because it does both. They novelize existing stories, and they tell original stories, or stories that slot into gaps, slot into the backstory of the major characters. It's a really well organized series that Sphere published in the 70s, and quite a good model for other TV shows, actually. If you adapt a whole season as one novel, and then you tell the stories of characters before the series began. So each character gets their own backstory. So this box set came out, for example, at some point. Wow, I bought that for $2.50. And it includes, I might have put the wrong ones in. They might have been changed, but Rose's story. The writers were Terence Brady and Charlotte Bingham. And that's the Jean Marsh character. This, in some ways, is the centerpiece of the whole series, I think. Rose is really the heart of Upstairs, Downstairs. It begins with her when she's still a lowly maid, and it finishes when it's in her power to save the family, as I remember, with the money she has and the money they've lost. And when they revived it briefly for 2 seasons in 2010, it's Rose at the heart of that too. It's a really lovely series. And I think that book does her justice. It's about her growing up in Norfolk at Lady Southwold's mansion, and then she moves to London to the house in Eaton Square. Sarah's story. Molly Hardwick, who I've mentioned before, who wrote many tie-ins for usually period drama series. Mr. Bellamy's story and Mr. Hudson's Diaries. The old stick of a butler who was softer and kinder than he ever seemed. That's a terrific set, really. These ones are more or less the seasons as they went. I don't know if they're in the right order. That's the original Upstairs, Downstairs. John Hawkesworth, adapting the whole first season. very meticulously, as I remember. And then In My Lady's Chamber, the same author, when things start hotting up, when the Titanic goes down and the mother gets killed, and oh, hang on, we are out of order slightly. The Years of Change, Molly Hardwick. Maybe that's correct. We're still pre-First World War at this point. And then The War to End All Wars, Molly Hardwick. And that's the harrowing season. When we see the First World War through the eyes of people who go to the front and come back, and the home front in London. On with the Dance, Michael Hardwick, and Endings and Beginnings. These have got the two most terrible covers, just dreadful. These aren't kind of, they look like they can't quite be bothered to enjoy the 1920s. Very poor design, really. They deserve better as a series, and of course they're all gone now. And Mrs. Bridges' story as an extra first-person narrative. Just imagine if other shows did the same. It'd be brilliant. Cagney and Lacey do it. They do a wonderful... There's only one tie-in to Cagney and Lacey, and it begins with both characters separately in their youth, and they converge, and then it becomes the show we know. And it's a lovely combination of, I think, kind of Judith Krantz with Ed McBain. So clever. Because what the people doing these books realise is that the people reading them aren't just TV viewers, aren't just film viewers, they're also readers. They know their Maeve Binchys, and they know popular fiction. They know their science fiction. They know detective fiction. And so when people adapt the books, they have to do it in a way that will appeal to people who read as much as they watch. I do have another pile there of stuff behind me, but I'm already over time. Maybe I'll talk about Star Trek tie-ins at a different time. As I've said before, I'm dropping my tea again. My guilty pleasure is, for some reason, are these Star Trek books. Yep, and that's what there's a pile of there, as well as Gremlins, which was always my favourite, one of my favourites, movie adaptations. Gremlins by George Gipe. And I think it was just the Christmassiness. And I remember Christmas 1986, when I was doing work experience, this being my book of that particular week. Anyway, I could go on for a long time about tie-ins. I will talk to you again soon. Do go and like and look at my Patreon. Patreon is ready for a few new videos and things, I think. I don't want to neglect my Patreon people. I'm pleased you're all here watching, and I'll see you again in the next episode. Goodbye.